This video is brought to you by Xavi's new Star Trek merch line. At the end of episode 3, Picard finally said engage and we set off on our outer space adventure. This being a 10 episode story, the first 3 episodes essentially made up Act 1, and now we're into Act 2 where some more action starts. I absolutely loved the opening segment of this episode. Seeing Picard truly happy and fulfilled in his work as he helps to build a new society, working side by side with what has been his enemy since the start of TNG, have to highlight Stewart's performance again in this segment. The moment he learns about the Mars attack and what it may mean for his operation is heartbreaking. That happiness and feeling that he's doing something truly good just bleeds away. It's really tragic. Now on our way to other worlds, we get some terrific banter between the crew of the Serena. Raffi and Picard have a good back and forth, Raffi being so disillusioned and self-centered to admit she probably cares about Picard's larger mission, Rios just keeping his head down and doing his job while Jurati tries to settle into a routine, and the assortment of holographic characters Santiago Carrera is using to show off his true acting talents. It's very different to your typical Starfleet crew, which I like. There isn't an exact command structure. There's bickering and debate and egos in the mix, and it creates a really refreshing dynamic. It almost resembles the dynamic in the cast of Deep Space Nine. However, the true meat of the episode is in the events which take place on the planet Vashti from the beginning. But first, a word from this video's sponsor. This video is brought to you by a new Star Trek merch line now available at Xavi.com. A slew of brand new, very cool designs to satiate your Star Trek itch. I myself really like this Section 31-esque jumper, which I was kindly gifted with. It's got a really nice embroidered design, one of many really cool designs in this range, and is pretty cozy for these winter months. Click the link below and use the promo code BATTLE20 for 20% off the Star Trek range, or the code BATTLE10 for 10% off the site-wide items. Thank you once again to Xavi for sponsoring this video, and now back to Star Trek Picard. When Picard returns to Vashti, the extreme contrast between what we saw previously further conveys the weight of both Picard and Starfleet's mistakes. Up until this point, we've been told what much of the fallout of these mistakes were, and we can see the guilt Picard feels over it, but this episode really allows us to explore those consequences for the people it affected the most. What was once a place of hope and unity has degraded into a harsh and cruel landscape. However, from a viewing standpoint, it does make it fun. One of the few good things from Star Trek V: The Final Frontier was the idea behind the planet Nimbus 3 and its Wild West frontier-like inspiration, and this inspiration is clearly present in the creation of Vashti as well. It's become a hostile place with danger around every corner and an unbreakable sense of tension. I really like the new character Elnor. It's perfectly logical for Picard to need someone with these incredible fighting skills, considering he himself is supposed to be in his 90s at this point. Picard being essentially the equivalent of a fun uncle or grandparent to the young Elnor was really touching. So once again, the relationship between the two works as a way for Picard to deal with the fallout of his mistakes on a truly personal level. I also really like the touch of Picard scolding Elnor for killing a character. Just another quintessential Picard moment. But at the same time, Elnor pulling a Legolas was kind of fucking awesome. Another thing I really liked about the Vashti setting was the diversity of the Romulan culture on display. Many sci-fi properties are guilty of portraying monocultures, alien societies where everyone looks, acts, and behaves the same way. Babylon 5 does this, and so does Star Trek, which is why it's cool to see recent Trek try and address this. Discovery showed us diversity in its Klingon houses, and now Picard shows us Romulan mythologies and noble orders. Just more stuff to give the Star Trek universe more depth and texture, which is welcome. Over at the Borg Cube, not a lot happens, to be honest. Narek and Soji doing their riff on risky business was fun. Something which did weird me out though was the scene between Narek and Risso. Like, didn't she say Narek was her baby brother? Because if so, she was getting way too touchy-feely there. While it didn't advance the plot a whole lot, at least we have a deadline for when this hits the fan now. But the best part of the episode, for me at least, was an excellent little space battle against a local warlord in an antique bird of prey. I always get a kick out of seeing classic ship designs done with modern VFX, and being directed by Riker himself, Jonathan Frakes, this guy is a pro at this sort of space action by now. The geography is clear, the objectives make sense, and using phasers to slice off an nacelle was a cool little bit. But of course the big finisher was the appearance of 7 of 9. We all knew she was going to show up because of the trailers, but this was still a well executed entrance. Did it suck? No. As predicted, Star Trek Picard is picking up the pace now with some more action and plot development. The preview for the next episode looks cool, and I'm really interested to see what kind of dynamic Picard and 7 have. I don't know if they've met already in the story by this point, or if this is their first encounter. Either way, these are 2 of my favourite Star Trek characters ever, and seeing them on screen will be an absolute joy. Alan Kenyon asks, what are your thoughts on the show Final Space? Mixed, I would say. I got to about episode 5, but I haven't watched any more of it thus far. It kind of has the same problem as the Orville season 1 for me, in that the comedy feels unneeded. Most of the story is pretty straightforward and dramatic, and I actually do want to follow it, but the main character really irritates me whenever he has some kind of prolonged comedy bit or gag. I feel like the show is trying to be the next Rick and Morty when it really doesn't have to. If the main character was reined in a little bit, I'd enjoy it more. He can be a Captain Reynolds type of character if the creators of the show want a fun protagonist, but he doesn't have to be overtly as comedic as he is. Thank you for watching. If you like my videos, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay up to date on all my new uploads. Over on my Patreon, you can see videos early. Speaking of which, I'd like to quickly thank all of my patrons who are now appearing on screen. Have a good one, and as always, live long and prosper.